guys, I'm Kim, and today I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the basics of how to use your camera on manual and not on automatic. So say you've just purchased like a DSLR and you want to learn how to use it on your manual, but you don't know what any of all the weird buttons on the back of it are talking about. I get it, it's super confusing at the beginning, and but to make it really simple, there's three main things that you really need to know, and that's your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. So the three of them work together to kind of help control like your stylistic choices about how the image, basically like the entire look and feel, and how to adapt to different lighting scenarios, because photography is just about looking at light and then trying to capture it, essentially. Like the word itself means like painting with light. So basically the first one I'd start out with is your aperture, and think of your aperture as kind of like in the lens, it's a ring that kind of goes from small to large, and it controls how much light is going to come into your camera when you take the photo. So a low aperture, say in like 1.2 or 1.8, is the aperture is as big as it can be. It's going to allow in as much light as possible, and you're going to have a really shallow depth of field then. And then on the opposite end of that is say like f20, where you're going to have quite like everything in the photo will be in focus and will be like pretty sharp, but you're not going to allow in as much light because the aperture is quite a lot smaller. And then the second thing that's going to control your exposure is your ISO, which is basically, when we used to shoot with film, it kind of means like the light sensitivity of the film. So a low ISO, say ISO 100, is gonna give you a really beautiful, clear image with like no grain, but it's primarily used when the scene is brighter. And on the other end of that, if you have a higher ISO, like 500 or 600, or even goes up to like 10,000, you're gonna have a grainier image, but it's gonna help you capture darker scenes, or say if you're shooting at night or something. The third thing of that is your shutter speed, and that basically determines how long the shutter is open for when you take the photo, which basically is like how long your shutter is going to be open for when you take the photo. So if you have a fast shutter speed, it's going to freeze movement really well. Not a lot of light's going to come into the camera. On the opposite end of that, if you have a slow shutter speed, lots of light is going to come in, but if there's any movement, it's going to be blurry. And sometimes that's something you want, sometimes it's not. So that's where it kind of comes down to, like, photography is a lot about making choices of how you want something to look, or what your final kind of result is. So basically the way the three of those would work together is, say like it's a really bright sunny day, I want to take a photo of a person, and I usually shoot with like a lower f-stop, so that means that the aperture is quite wide open. I'm going to have a really shallow depth of field. On a bright sunny day, that means that my shutter speed would be up to kind of capture the moment, as well as to stop too much light from coming in and overexposing the image. And I'd also shoot with a lower ISO, because if I want to add in grain, I can do that later, and also because it's bright out, I don't need a higher ISO. Versus say you were shooting at night, and you might also want to have a more wide open shutter speed, more wide open aperture, but you also want to bump up your ISO, and then to kind of help capture, like, because there's not going to be as much light to kind of help you capture whatever you're trying to capture, as well as have a lower shutter speed so that there's more time for the light to come in to properly expose your photo. So that's basically the gist of it. Hopefully that helps you out. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.